Hi, I'm Jordan. My son told me not to show up to his wedding. No explanation, no hesitation. He erased my name from the program, left my seat empty like I was already gone. But what they didn't expect was that I'd been keeping every receipt, every silent sacrifice, every lie they thought I'd swallow. They thought I'd just fade into the background. But I didn't. And when the truth finally spoke, it cost them everything. Thanksgiving was always my favorite time of year. Not for the turkey or the football, though I enjoyed both, but because it was one of the rare times everyone came together, no distractions, no excuses, just family. That's how I raised my son, Evan. That's what mattered most to me. So when the mailbox stayed quiet that year, no envelope, no gold-trimmed invitation, I noticed. At first, I thought maybe the mail ran late. Then I figured maybe it was digital. Kids these days. But no email came. No call. Just silence. And then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I answered anyway. Don't bother showing up to the wedding. Click. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, just those 8 words. The line went dead before I could say a thing. But that sentence was colder than Ohio's January wind. And it stuck with me, like frostbite under the skin. I sat at the kitchen table long after the call ended. The old clock ticked, loud and slow. My hands were still on the table, gripping nothing. I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly I was hollow. How does a man who worked double shifts to afford his son's football gear end up here? I remembered the bleachers, back when Evan still needed me to tie his cleats. I remembered helping him move into his college dorm, his mother crying beside me. I remembered co-signing on his first car, covering his medical deductible when he shattered his wrist snowboarding. He never asked for help, but I gave it every time. We didn't have money growing on trees, Lord knows that, but we had enough. And when we didn't, I made more. I gave up weekends, took early retirements, clipped coupons, all for him. After Mary died, I told myself I had to be both parents. I thought I was doing right. But somewhere between tuition and wedding bells, I stopped being dad. I became an inconvenience. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't all Evan. No. His fiancée, Nicole, always had a way of steering the wheel while pretending to sit passenger, sweet voice, polite smile. But her eyes sized me up like I was a stray dog on her new white carpet. Still, the question lingered. When did I stop being family and start being a burden? I drove to Evan's place the next morning, didn't call ahead. I wanted to look him in the eye. He opened the door halfway, already looking annoyed, like I'd ruined his weekend. We need to talk, I said. He didn't invite me in, just leaned against the frame. You're not coming to the wedding, Dad. My jaw clenched. Why? He exhaled like I was asking for too much. It's a small ceremony, just friends and current family. Current family, I repeated. The words tasted like rust. Nicole's voice floated from somewhere inside. Is everything okay? Evan turned slightly. It's fine. Then he looked back at me, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger rehearsing lines. Yeah, you'd make it awkward, he said. You don't really fit with the crowd. Awkward, didn't fit. He didn't look at me like a father. He looked at me like a loose thread on a new suit. I nodded slowly. My voice came out even. You've made your choice. I paused. I'll make mine too. And I walked away. The thing is, Evan didn't know. He didn't know that for the past 2 years I'd been covering his mortgage. Quietly, automatically, every first of the month, $1,827 pulled from my account to the bank. It was my way of helping, of giving him a stress-free start. He thought the mortgage was some work bonus Nicole helped him secure. He never asked. I never explained. I set it up right after their engagement, thinking it'd be my silent gift. Now sitting at home, staring at the payment app on my phone, that gift felt like a leash. And suddenly, I didn't feel like holding it anymore. Funny thing about gifts, they can be taken back. 2 days later, I ran into Bonnie Cartwright at the grocery store. Hey, Jordan, she chirped, holding a bag of frozen peas. Big wedding weekend, huh? I blinked. What? Evan's wedding. Half the town's going. Why aren't you? The question hit like a slap. Not because she meant harm, Bonnie's never been cruel, but because the exclusion wasn't quiet. It was public. And worse, it was accepted. In our town, not being invited to your child's wedding wasn't just sad. It was shameful. Folks whispered, wondered, assumed. Maybe I'd been a drunk, a cheater, abusive. The burn of embarrassment replaced the ache of hurt. I smiled politely, made an excuse, and walked out without finishing my shopping. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd eaten at with Mary for 35 years. The mortgage statement lay in front of me. The next payment was due in 5 days. I had a different plan. The alarm went off at 6:30 sharp, just like every morning. Same ringtone, same light filtering through the kitchen blinds. The smell of black coffee filled the room, and the familiar sound of the old percolator bubbled softly behind me. Everything looked the same, but inside nothing felt the same. I sat down with my mug and stared at the mortgage paperwork still sitting on the table. I hadn't touched it since the phone call. That sentence, "Don't bother showing up," had echoed every day since, bouncing off the walls, haunting my sleep. Funny, how quiet can hold so much noise. There's a saying I heard once, revenge is best served not cold, but clean. I never thought of myself as someone who'd take revenge. I was a father, a husband, a man who showed up. But sitting there, I realized this wasn't revenge. This was correction. The cursor blinked on my laptop screen, waiting. I opened the bank portal and signed in. No fanfare, no hesitation, just one click. The auto payment vanished. The account unlink followed. Just like that, 2 years of quiet sacrifice disappeared with a tap of my finger. No alert to Evan, no text, no call. Let him notice it on his own. Silence has a way of carrying more weight than shouting ever could. If he didn't want me at the wedding, let's see how far that boundary stretched. Later that afternoon, I drove to Ruth's place. She's my older sister by 7 years, but you'd think it was 20 the way she talks to me. Always blunt, always reading between the lines. I didn't have to say much. She opened the door and frowned. "What happened?" I shrugged. "Thought I'd stop by." She poured 2 coffees, hers with cream, mine still black, and sat across from me. The silence between us was familiar, comfortable. "He doesn't want me there," I finally said. "So maybe he doesn't want anything of mine." Ruth didn't blink. "You canceled the mortgage?" I looked at her, surprised. "How'd you— You're a Jordan." "We don't scream. We don't throw punches. We just pull the plug." Her words stung more than I expected. She looked at me like she was seeing our father again. Quiet, cold, cutting when crossed. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I said. "No? Then what's it for?" she asked. "Correction or control?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know, not fully. She reached across the table, laid her hand over mine. "Just make sure you're not using silence the same way Dad did. It breaks more than it fixes." I left with her words trailing me like a shadow. Still, I didn't regret the click. Not yet. The next day, I stopped by Miller's Market for a loaf of bread and some soup cans. Nothing unusual until I ran into Dave Jensen, a guy I'd known since high school. "You hear about the venue change?" he said, tossing a pack of beef jerky into his cart. "What venue change?" He looked surprised. "Evan's wedding, moved it last minute, must have been some kind of budget issue." My niece was working the original place. They canceled a week out. I stood there holding a can of tomato soup as the words sank in. Budget issue. So the echo had reached them. One click. Was this about respect? Or was it about leverage? Had I crossed the line from dignity to manipulation? But then I reminded myself, Evan's not a child. He's not owed endless support. He made a choice. He said I didn't belong. Fine. Let's see how he does standing on his own. "You can't build a kingdom on someone else's generosity and then exile the builder," I muttered, mostly to myself. Dave just chuckled. "What's that?" "Nothing," I said, tossing the soup in my basket. Driving home, I started preparing myself for the fallout. It wasn't a question of if, it was when. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I pulled into the driveway. The house was quiet again, but not in the same way as that morning. This quiet hummed with tension. The mailbox held a single envelope. White, sealed, Return address, the mortgage company. I opened it at the kitchen table, same place I'd once stacked birthday cards and holiday letters. Notice of failed payment. Automatic transaction declined. Full amount now due. I placed the letter exactly where the wedding invitation should have been, right in the center of the table. But there was no invitation. Only this. Respect is like credit. Once it runs out, the debt gets called. I turned off the kitchen light, the envelope still sitting there under the lamplight glow, and with a steady voice, I whispered to no one. Let's see who calls first. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that crawled along the baseboards and whispered in your ear when no one else was around. I had the stereo playing something soft, Bach maybe, but the music just floated on the surface. My thoughts kept sinking beneath it. Everything around me felt heavier than it used to. The recliner, the bookshelf, even the family photos on the wall seemed to sag, as if the frames had grown tired of pretending everything was still okay. I stood up, more out of habit than need, and wandered over to the bookshelf. That's when I saw it, a Father's Day card, jammed between two books. Still sealed. I opened it. No signature, just Happy Father's Day in printed font and silence. That card was over a decade old. And just like that, something cracked open in me. A memory I hadn't touched in years slipped through before I could stop it. Evan's 17th birthday. I had grilled steaks. Made his favorite mashed potatoes, real ones, not the box stuff. Even baked a small cake, which was saying something for a guy who never baked. He never showed up. No call, no text, nothing. Hours passed and I kept the food warm. Candles flickered on the kitchen table until they gave up. I found out the next day he'd gone to his fiance's family's place. They'd thrown him a big party. I wasn't even a footnote. And I never said a word about it. What kind of father throws guilt around like confetti? That's what I told myself. But if I'm being honest, it stung in a place I didn't have words for. I was phased out quietly, like wallpaper someone got tired of. Maybe this wedding wasn't a surprise. Maybe this had been unfolding for years. Later that evening, Silas dropped by. He didn't call first, just knocked and came in with a six-pack like he always did. Brought the kind you pretend not to like, he said, setting the bottles down. We sat on the porch, no porch light on, just the hum of crickets and a fading sunset. I did something, I told him. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. That was Silas. He let the air do the heavy lifting. I told him about the mortgage, the silence, the wedding. Men like us didn't grow up learning how to talk about being hurt, he said finally. We just learned how to keep walking. I nodded. Yeah, but walking away and being erased, those aren't the same thing. He took a long sip from his bottle. No, they're not. And don't mistake the absence of drama for peace. Sometimes it's just suppression in a suit and tie. That hit harder than I expected. I'd worn that kind of silence my whole life, passed it on without realizing. I didn't feel better when he left, but I felt seen. Later that night, unable to sleep, I opened my old email archive, found one from Evan when he was 19. Just a few lines. Hey, sorry if I've been distant. Been figuring stuff out. Hope you're well. I remembered thinking at the time, good. He's growing up. I never replied. I told myself silence was enough, that he'd get the message. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he learned to mirror it so well. Guilt pressed against my ribs, but I didn't regret canceling the mortgage. That wasn't the problem. The problem was how much we'd let sit in silence. Regret doesn't mean retreat. I walked to the mantel and picked up an old photo of us. Me and Evan, fishing when he was 10. He had just caught a tiny bass and looked at me like I'd taught him to catch the moon. I nearly tossed it in the drawer. But I didn't. That moment was real. That version of us existed. I wasn't going to pretend it didn't, just because things had turned sour. Hope's not weakness, but begging for respect, that's a currency I'm done spending. I dusted off the frame, placed it back where it belonged, and took a long breath. Let's see how deep his silence goes. I remember the night clear as glass. I was flipping through the usual late-night reruns, half listening to the weather report, when her voice cut through. Mari, she was on one of those podcasts, Bridal Vision or something like that. They were talking about dream weddings on a budget. Her tone was polished, sweet, the kind she uses when she wants people to think she bakes pies and handwrites thank you notes. I took over the planning, she said. Lang was swamped, and honestly, some people just can't show up for the work behind the scenes. I didn't breathe. It wasn't the words, it was the smile behind them. The one people wear when they want to sound gracious while twisting the knife just a little deeper. I sat there, frozen. Can't show up, that's what she said. The same woman who sends me glossy Christmas cards with a paragraph about how grateful they are for family support. But that night, I heard her mask slip. Next morning, I was searching for my reading glasses and opened the top drawer of the hutch. That's when I saw it, an envelope, aged just enough to curl at the edges. The handwriting was Lang's. I opened it, a thank you card. Dad, thank you for always being there. Then, the rest was crossed out, thick black lines. He never mailed it. He never meant to, I guess. I sat down with that card in hand. It wasn't long, wasn't detailed, but it cracked something in me wider than I expected. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. How many things had I quietly done in the background, thinking it was understood? Turns out silence can't speak for you forever. I thought of every time I let people assume I was just the guy who showed up with a check and a handshake. Every time I thought actions spoke louder than words. But I was wrong. Sometimes, silence only feeds the story someone else wants to tell. Later that day, I opened my laptop and pulled up the podcast again. I needed to hear it fresh, with no emotion clouding it. Mari went on and on about florals, her DIY centerpieces, and how she and Lang built it all themselves. There was a photo gallery linked in the show notes, a link to her Instagram highlights, that DIY wedding queen. Lang's voice popped up in a story clip. We worked so hard to make this day special. Just the two of us. Not a whisper about me. No mention of who helped cover the venue deposit, who paid the advance on the tux rental, who footed the mortgage so their budget could go to flowers and hashtags. I hovered my mouse over the pause button, then moved to screenshots instead. The card, the podcast timestamp, the wedding invoice. Screenshots of her stories. No, I didn't plan to blast it online, but I wanted the record, I wanted clarity. Because when people try to rewrite history, you better have the footnotes. That weekend, I stepped outside for air, the crisp kind, the kind that stings a little but wakes you up. Mrs. Carter, my neighbor from down the street, stopped by with a pitcher of lemonade. Old habit. She used to bring it when my wife was alive. I caught a bit of Mari's podcast, she said gently. Sounds like you weren't involved in the final setup? I forced a smile. Yeah, seems that way. She hesitated. That's surprising, Jordan. You always had your hands in everything when Lang was growing up. I nodded. Didn't trust my voice. Pity. It's worse than insult. At least insult can be answered. Pity just hangs in the air and makes everything in you shrink a little. Back when Lang was in high school, I coached his team. After every game, he'd run up and yell, "That was all Dad's play." The other boys used to call me Coach J. That title meant something. Now, I'm not even a footnote in a wedding story. Inside the house, the silence wrapped back around me like a tight collar. Outside, you could hear laughter, some homecoming party 2 houses over, teenagers on the lawn, country music on a speaker. I went back in. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. Lang. Hey, Dad, he said, voice light, almost cheerful. I heard you found that card. Sorry. I meant to send it. It just slipped my mind. I waited. He didn't say anything else, so I said, thank you. Flat. Quiet. Then he launched into a whole rundown, napkin colors, whether the cake should be 4 tiers or 5, if the DJ should cut the father-daughter dance short so people could move on to the party stuff. I listened, didn't argue, didn't remind him he hadn't invited me. I just let him talk. He ended the call with, glad we're good, Dad. And that was that. But I knew better. Sometimes I forgot really means I didn't want to. And sometimes saying nothing says everything. That night, I went back to the drawer, locked the thank you card away, not to forget it, but to keep it, as evidence, as truth. Then I whispered to myself, just sleep, Bram. Tomorrow, I plan. It was sitting there, right on the kitchen counter next to the salt shaker and the morning paper I hadn't touched, plain white envelope, no return address. But the handwriting, it was Evan's. The same slant he used when he wrote me a note after his first baseball game in middle school. I didn't have to open it to know something was off. I stood over it, coffee brewing behind me, filling the room with a scent that usually grounded me. Not today. Today, everything felt a little too still. Some letters don't need to be opened to land a punch. I poured my cup, walked to the window, and watched the neighbor's dog dig another hole in their flower bed. That simple, useless act somehow felt more honest than the letter waiting on my counter. "We don't heal by pretending something didn't cut us," I muttered. I turned, picked it up, and slit the envelope open. The first thing I saw was a header. Law Offices of Merrick Stein. My stomach tightened. It was a formal letter from Marisol's family lawyer citing financial entanglements and demanding, that I cease all monetary contributions involving Evan's name, effective immediately. They used the word entanglements, like I was a tangled string in their neat little plan, a mess to be snipped off so their story could be tidy. The letter even referenced mortgage payments, tuition remnants, car insurance. Said such contributions could complicate the financial independence of the marriage. I flipped to the last page. There it was, Evan's signature. Sharp, precise, no hesitation in the stroke. They didn't just want distance, they wanted deletion. I sat down, and the chair creaked louder than usual. The kitchen clock ticked so hard I swore it was echoing. I read the letter again, slower this time. There was no misunderstanding. It was clear, clean, cold. Then the doorbell rang. Naomi stood there with a loaf of banana bread in one hand and concern in her eyes. She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped in like she always had. Former social worker, single mom. No filter, but always knew when not to push. I didn't have to say a word. She saw the letter on the table and just sat. I told her everything. Didn't hold back, didn't dress it up. She listened, nodding gently. When I paused, she said, "Sometimes kids think cutting cords makes them grown, but some cords are lifelines." She told me about her son, how he left angry, full of things he never said. It took him 5 years to come back, not because she reached out, but because she didn't. She let the silence grow loud enough for him to hear himself. "Don't answer the letter yet," she said. "Let silence do the teaching." After she left, I sat there. That letter still open like it was breathing on its own. My emotions spun. 1 minute, grief. The next, fury. Part of me wanted to fire off a response. Itemize every sacrifice, every birthday missed at work to cover his needs, every damn signature I put next to his because he couldn't qualify on his own. But then I heard an old line from the core echo in my head. "Never start a war you're not ready to finish." I drafted a reply in my mind, rewrote it, rehearsed it, then let it burn before it ever saw ink. This wasn't about dollars. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about who I was, or wasn't, to him anymore. If Evan needed clean air, fine, but let him feel the vacuum of it. So instead of writing back, I pulled out a box from the hallway closet. The one with all the records, receipts from his schooling, his first car, braces, community college classes he dropped halfway through, every loan I co-signed. I put it all into a black binder, labeled it, "What I gave without asking anything back." Not for Evan, not for lawyers, for me. I placed it in the safe right next to my will, because someday someone might need to know the whole story. Then I took the legal letter, folded it in half, tore it clean down the center, and tucked the pieces back into the envelope. Sometimes not replying is the most powerful reply you can give. Just after noon, I opened the front door for fresh air, and there it was. Evan's car. Parked across the street, engine off. He didn't get out, didn't wave, just sat there, but he was watching me, and I let him. I was sitting at my desk when the call came. The sun was bleeding through the blinds, landing on old papers and the dust I hadn't bothered to wipe this week. My laptop sat open, files pulled up, property tax records, bank statements, receipts older than Lang's career. Then my phone rang. Lang's name lit the screen. "Hey," he said. Too smooth, too controlled. "I took care of everything," he continued. "House is mine now." Just like that. My eyes flicked to the framed photo of us on the front porch, paint rollers in hand, when we'd redone the siding ourselves 20 years ago. We'd laughed so hard that day he spilled a whole bucket of primer on his shoes. And now it was his. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The silence told him I was listening. He added, "It's just paperwork. Mari wanted to be sure everything was clean before the wedding." Click. He hung up. A minute later, a PDF landed in my inbox, copy of a deed transfer. Looked official. Lang's name listed as the new owner. But the dates were off. Some of the fields were strangely blurred, others oddly aligned. My name was on there, but not where it should have been. I opened the binder of originals, mortgage statements under my name, tax records paid from my account, every remodeling permit in my handwriting. He might have manipulated the paper, but he couldn't erase the ink I'd laid down with sweat. I stared at the signature block. Lang's was there. Mine wasn't, but Evan's signature was. I set the file aside, stood up, walked out into the yard. The air was thick. Georgia summers never let you forget the heat. I paced, shoes crunching against the gravel. This wasn't just about property. It was about erasure. Taking something I built and rewriting the story to fit their picture-perfect wedding fantasy. Later that night, I got an invitation to a vendor appreciation dinner from Mari's family. Public gesture, open bar, speeches. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won. They handed me a printed program at the entrance. My name was on the list. Special thanks, Jordan Matthews. Mari beamed at the crowd during her speech. Evan followed. He read aloud from a letter of gratitude he claimed to have written, mentioned family, support, guidance. But as he read, I heard what wasn't there. The line I remembered from the version I saw weeks ago, "Thank you for being the foundation I could always return to," was gone. Instead, a lukewarm line about those who contributed in the background. I clapped, because that's what you're supposed to do. Someone next to me whispered, "That was sweet, wasn't it?" I nodded, but something in me pulled away. After dessert plates clinked and coffee was being poured, I quietly got up and walked out. No drama, no scene, just done. Next morning, I ran into Pastor Green after service. He walked beside me, slow and steady. "Son," he said, "pride's a good servant, but a poor master." I gave him a half smile. He looked me straight in the eyes. But boundaries are holy. Back home, I flipped through the program again. Someone had scribbled notes in pencil, crossed out sentences, rewrites in margins. That letter had been edited like a marketing flyer. That afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood. I could feel the stares. One woman waved hesitantly. Another crossed to the other side of the street. I wasn't the man they once admired. I was the man who walked out of a thank you speech. But under all that shame, there was something else rising, a kind of strength I hadn't felt in a long while. I returned to my study. The room felt tighter now, but more focused. The binder of receipts sat next to the title documents, facts over feelings. I drafted an email to Evan, kept it short. Effective immediately, I will no longer be covering the mortgage. All future payments and responsibilities are yours to manage. No blame, no explanation. I hovered over send for a second, not because I wasn't sure, because I wanted to remember how this felt. I clicked. The room didn't erupt. The world didn't collapse. But I changed. That night, as I lay in bed, a chime echoed through the silence. A text from Evan. "You're making a big mistake." The rehearsal dinner was at some high-end venue in Dallas. Linen crisp, candles glowing, soft music in the background like we were all actors in someone else's movie. I arrived early, as always. I've never been one to make an entrance. Found myself a quiet spot near the back, close enough to hear, far enough not to be seen unless someone was looking. Mari's mother, Verity, took the mic. She smiled that practiced smile of hers, her voice polished like she'd rehearsed in front of a mirror for days. She praised Mari and Lang for building everything from scratch. Her words floated through the room like perfume, pleasing, artificial, meant to linger. Then came the dagger, she said. Even Jordan, with his contributions. A pause, enough silence to hear a fork scrape a plate. The room gave its polite applause. I clapped too, but my hands, they felt like stone. I kept my smile, that smile we all wear when we're being erased gently. Verity kept going. Words like legacy, respect, family. My name was peppered in, barely enough to taste, never enough to matter. She said something about unseen sacrifices and men who stood behind others, and I could feel the backhand in her compliment. Mari looked my way then, not long, just enough to say she knew, enough to say she wasn't going to stop it. That glance hurt worse than any insult. Because silence isn't neutral. It chooses a side. I thought of my wife again, gone all these years, and her voice came back to me like it always did. Recognition is the oxygen of the soul. I didn't stand up. I didn't correct anyone. Let them clap. I didn't need their sound to remember what I'd done. But what came next, what came after the toast, wasn't subtle. A young man in a crisp shirt walked up, handed me a name tag. It said staff. Thought maybe he made a mistake until he pointed me toward the back area, said they need help with the chairs. A few guests looked my way like I was supposed to get moving. Another asked if I knew where the lighting controls were. I straightened up, looked that kid in the eye. No, sir, I'm the father of the groom. He blinked. Oh, sorry, I didn't wait for him to finish. Just turned and walked toward the open bar, not because I needed a drink, but because I needed space. Mari had seen it happen. She didn't flinch. She didn't stop it. Recognition, when it finally comes, hurts more when it's late. I stayed long enough to be polite, not long enough to be invisible again. After the rehearsal, folks lingered in groups, talking, laughing, swapping stories like they'd all been there for every chapter of Evan's life. I stepped outside into the garden, under string lights that hung like they belonged in a magazine spread. Lang was by the stone wall, sipping whiskey. I walked up slow. You've built everything you ever wanted, I said, but you forgot the foundation. He didn't look surprised. Maybe he expected this. You always had the choice to speak up, he said. No one told you to stay quiet. That was the game, wasn't it? Twist the silence into guilt. Mari joined us. She looked tired, too tired for someone about to get married. Verity hovered behind them like a statue, unreadable. I pulled a folder from my coat. Inside, every receipt, every check stub, the deed, a printout of the podcast where he claimed I abandoned him. Even the thank you card with Evan's signature, the one he denied writing. I handed it to Lang. He opened it. Didn't say a word. Mari stared. She read too. Her hands trembled. Verity frowned. That was all I got from her. I didn't need them to cry. I didn't want them to. I wanted them to stop pretending. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I looked at the ceiling for a long time before sleep found me. I knew tomorrow's ceremony couldn't go on the way they planned. Not unless the truth stood too. So I made a decision. Tomorrow, if they mention me, I'll stand. Not to ask. To state. I'm here. I've always been here. I closed my eyes, rehearsed the words. Not loud. Just clear. Morning crept in, slow. I woke before the alarm. In the silence, I whispered to the mirror, if family is built on memory, then don't silence mine. The morning sun filtered through stained glass, bathing the pews in a soft mosaic of color. The church hummed quietly, organ pipes stretching long, like deep breaths held in ceremony. I arrived early again, hands in my pockets, mind steady. Some of the pews were marked with my name on the program, but when I looked up, they sat empty. I'd been allotted space, not presence. The flowers were pristine, arranged with purpose. The music was carefully chosen. Everything was intentional, but none of it felt like it belonged to me. I thought of the invitation, the clean cardstock with names embossed in gold. I remembered the envelope I left sealed back home, with the binder of every document they had hoped I'd forget. It stayed on the table, waiting, like me. The bridal march swelled. I stayed in the back, still. If respect is earned in front of witnesses, I whispered, then walk with your head up. Halfway through the ceremony, Berto Ortega stood from his seat. Mari's father. Quiet, usually, measured. He stepped up to the altar as the pastor paused. Berto cleared his throat. I'd like to say something, he said, voice strong but unshaken. All eyes turned. I've seen a lot in my life, he started. But I want to recognize the man who laid the first brick. The man who never asked to be thanked out loud. But I'll do it now because it's overdue. He looked directly at me. Jordan, he said, you're the real provider. The one who gave Lang his first chance at owning something. You didn't just offer a roof. You modeled what work and sacrifice look like. There was a silence heavier than anything the organ could have played. Some guests nodded, some blinked. Mari froze. Lang looked like he'd swallowed a rock. Berto didn't flinch. I sat there, heart hammering, but still, it wasn't applause I wanted. Just truth, finally. said out loud. Mari's eyes found mine. Wet but not broken. Something in her had cracked open. I saw it. But it wasn't the end. After the ceremony, a young usher approached, awkward and formal. "Sir, someone asked me to deliver this to you." It was a cream envelope, my name written in neat cursive. I opened it, the legal notice, the same one I saw in draft days ago, but now official, notarized, stamped. Evan had signed, transferring full claim of the house, mortgage, everything, back to me. Mari hadn't signed it, but Evan had. That was enough. I stood in the church's courtyard, people walking past, murmuring. Some noticed. "Did you see that? That's legal, isn't it? About time." It wasn't the kind of scene you celebrate. It was quiet, but it rang louder than anything said in vows. That paper in my hand was heavier than it looked. For years, they'd let silence rewrite what was true. But now, the ink had caught up. The reception moved outside. Glasses clinked, music played, people mingled. Someone said to me, "It's good you finally got what you deserve." I didn't smile. I wasn't looking for justice that came in neat packages. I just wanted to stop being rewritten while I was still alive. Mari came over, alone. Her hands were trembling. "I'm sorry," she said. I looked at her, saw the weight she carried now. I nodded, not because all was forgiven, but because she'd stopped pretending it didn't happen. Lang didn't come near me. He stood by the bar, talking to someone, but his eyes never met mine. He knew. Verity approached next. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just listened. Her voice cracked. I misjudged. I let pride. I let her talk, but I didn't offer her the ease of my comfort. I wasn't cruel. I just didn't lie. In the far corner, Naomi appeared. From years ago, she hadn't changed much. She reached out, placed her hand on mine, a quiet reminder that not all bridges burn. I thought about that thank you card Evan had once given me, the one with lines scratched out, words redacted. That card was still in the binder, but now it didn't sting. I let it rest there. When a sudden pause hit the reception, someone called for a word from the father of the groom. I didn't plan to speak, but I walked up anyway. No script, no notes. I stood at the lectern, took in the room. "I'm not here to accuse," I said. "I'm not here to rewind anything, but I'll say this. Family isn't just those who share your blood or wear rings. It's those who don't push away what they once claimed to need." A few guests froze. Others blinked back emotion. Mari nodded, gently. I walked back to my seat, not expecting applause, just quiet. And I got it. The wedding continued. But for me, something had shifted. That night I returned to my room, alone. I opened the binder, pulled out the framed card, and read Evan's name under the words legal transfer. The house was quiet when I got back. The echo of the reception still hung in my head, glasses clinking, scattered laughter, the occasional song lyric muffled by chatter. But now it was just me and the porch light, buzzing gently above. As I turned the key in the door, I noticed something tucked beneath the welcome mat. An envelope, cream-colored, thick paper. My name, written in Ellery's careful hand. I stood under the porch light and opened it right there. Her handwriting hadn't changed. No cursive flourishes, just plain, steady lines. "Dad," it began. "I saw you tonight, really saw you." She didn't write like someone trying to make peace. She wrote like someone who'd been carrying silence for too long. Every mortgage payment I'd made for Lang, every time I'd stayed quiet while they painted me out of the picture, she listed it all. Each one laid bare, like a row of bricks I'd used to build a home I never got to live in. Then this line, "Seeing you stand tonight reminded me that truth matters more than comfort." I stood there a long while, rereading. A few tears slipped down, but not from pain, more like something softening after being stiff for too long. Inside, I placed the letter on the table beneath the lamp. I left it open. I wanted to see those words lit. The next morning came gray and early. I poured coffee, same as always, but this time my hands didn't tremble. Something made me check my bank account. The mortgage was gone. Paid, no. Removed, released. My name no longer tied to that monthly bleed. An email confirmed it. Legally processed, registrar stamped, Evan's signature on file, full transfer, full release. The chain around my ankle had finally rusted through and dropped. I stepped out onto the porch, mug in hand. A neighbor walking his dog gave a slight nod. Another, watering her plants, offered a small wave. They knew. I didn't need them to say it, but they knew. I let the sunrise wash over me. It wasn't forgiveness, it was just lighter. The words from an old speech played in my head. Maya Angelou, I think. My mission, my purpose, is to bring truth into people's lives. Now, truth lived here, too. Later that day, I sat in my old recliner flipping through photos from the reception. A few of me, awkward smiles, mostly real. Naomi had snapped one of me and Mari mid-conversation. We were both mid-sentence, caught in a blur of truth. She had walked up to me, eyes low, voice quiet. I see you. Just that. Not I'm sorry or you were right. Just, I see you. And oddly, that landed harder than any apology might have. Lang, from across the room, gave me a half nod. No words. But a nod's enough when words have always failed. Verity didn't say much either, but her hand rested on her heart when she looked my way. Naomi touched my arm as she left. You were never invisible, Jordan. Some folks just kept their eyes shut. At home again, I gathered the three things that had come to mean more than most ever realized. The thank you card from Evan, never sent. The letter from Ellery, open on the table, and the mortgage deed release form, cold, factual, permanent. I laid them side by side, one crossed out, one full of clarity, one signed and sealed. I let them sit together, not to dwell on the past, but to witness it properly, finally. Because being a provider isn't just about covering bills or signing checks. It's about showing up, fully, wholly, even when no one claps for it. And it's about drawing a line, saying, this is where I begin, not where I end. I smiled then, not wide, just enough to feel it in my chest. This is home, I said to the quiet room. Not just the walls, the truth in it. Outside, the sky deepened. Crickets chirped somewhere near the fence line. I looked up at the porch light. We're not perfect, I whispered, but we're real.